This video will accompany your notes on Chapter 6, Revising Business Messages in the Business Communication class. We've already covered the initial revision of the message, and now we're checking on proofreading, or we're doing the proofreading of that, checking for any errors or oversights in spelling, in grammar, in punctuation, names and numbers, and the overall format of the document. In proofreading, there are some certain standard types of proofreader marks that have developed over the years. You may find in a particular setting that there may be some variations from these, but for the most part, these are ones that I've seen in my own experience, and we're going to see how we might apply those in just a moment. But you might want to go ahead and write these down in your notes to make sure you've got a record of these. Here are a few more. The insert mark, by the way, is a little arrow coming from underneath to insert either a word, a phrase, or as you can see here, punctuation, or even just to indicate that a space needs to be inserted there. Let's look at an example here of an unmarked copy. You can look at this document, spend a couple of minutes looking through it, and you can see that there are some errors that are pretty obvious, and some that may not be so obvious. So what we would want to do is to then apply these proofreading marks to correct the errors here. You know, maybe this is a thing of days gone by. It's easier now because of, say, Microsoft Word, to be able to, even in a team document, to track changes so someone can go in and actually make physical changes to the document and show the changes more or less as suggestions or impermanent in case someone else in the team wants to challenge, someone's revisions. Well, let's look at this document in a revised version. As you can see here, the line is drawn through. This is to inform you that, because that's one of those simply an unnecessary opening phrase that's not helpful. And notice that line is drawn through it, then you have the little squiggle or the little loop showing, take this thing away. And then under the B in beginning, you find 3 underlines there that indicate that word should be capitalized. Same thing for September, the S in September. Notice the W in West Side should not be capitalized, and so LC, lowercase, circled, and the slash, the mark through, indicates that that's the error or the change that needs to be made. Notice the west side of the building is not a single word, and so you've got a little insertion mark, the little arrow, and then the pound sign that indicated to insert a space there. So hopefully you can see some of these other ones. Notice the word doors is inserted with a little arrow, and then the word actually written in there. Exits is taken out. So of the fact that phrase there as unnecessary and unhelpful. Notice the word cannot. You see how it is pulled together. Cannot is a single word in most contexts, and so the little half loop, above and below, is indicates that words should be brought together. That space basically between them should be eliminated. Another important one you can see is in the alarms right over here. When you've got a transposition, that is a couple of letters that are out of order, then you can make that change. You can do the same thing, by the way, with words. If you had 2 words that should be, like if for some reason you wanted to reverse the order of avoid and setting here, you could have a squiggle like that. That is, that just change the order of those as well. I guess it would go something like that to show the change of order. Notice here, please, it says utilize. Utilize is one of those, fancy schmancy words that can be short. Just say use. And yet I see that a lot in universities where use would be much simpler and better. I think you see one here, ear piercing, where you've got a insertion of a hyphen there. So hopefully you can tell from this that how some of these marks should be used in producing a revised copy, and this is the revision, the corrected version that results from that. For proofreading routine documents, for computer messages, just read it on the screen or print a rough copy to read. For handwritten or printed messages, read it carefully and use proofreading marks to indicate changes. You know, the reasons that you might want to use proofreading marks is maybe you're not using some kind of a software that allows for tracking changes. Another one might be if you're working simply off paper copies, let's say within a team, then using these standard proofreading remarks can be a really good way to handle it. But also, if you are, for instance, proofing a written document and it's going to go to someone else, maybe secretarial staff or the author of it to use, that's when knowing these proofreading marks, these standard marks, can be helpful. In proofreading complex documents, and by that we might mean longer documents, those with multiple parts, maybe a number of references between them, you just have to, let's say, take a bit more care. Print a copy, preferably double-spaced, even, of course, if the final document is going to be single-spaced. Set it aside for a while. Allow adequate time for careful proofreading, taking time to do that. Sometimes, if it's a document you've created, you may have made an error and you don't see it because you wrote it. Your mind just doesn't pick up on that. It's always nice to have a fresh set of eyes to look at a document, and the more important it is to have somebody else, help you with that. Be prepared to find errors and don't criticize yourself each time you find an error. Breathe a sigh of relief that you took the time to find it. Read the message at least twice for meaning and for grammar and mechanics. That's really important to me. It's tough in, for instance, grading student papers, especially lengthy papers. It's so easy to get caught up sometimes in grammar and poor mechanics that you may not really read for style and for the overall message. And so it's really important to try to give each of those their due. Don't get caught up in you certainly don't want to ignore grammatical errors, because sometimes, in fact, you don't know what the meaning of the actual document or the message is, because the grammar or the sentence construction can be confusing or simply wrong. Slow down, reduce your reading speed, focus on individual words. And then finally, evaluating the outcome. Ask yourself once it's done, how successful will this communication be? Does it achieve the intended effect? Does it say what you want it to say? Does the message come across in the way that you think it should? Will it achieve its purpose? As I've said before, ask yourself, what does success look like? Is this going to be a successful document? There is a memo here that is poorly written, and you could probably find some of the mistakes here. It doesn't take the U view. There are certainly some redundancies, and there's some lists here that really probably the reader could benefit from an enumeration or use of graphic highlighting here. I will leave it to you to look this over, see if you can identify some of the problems. And what I sometimes do on a test, for instance, is to give you a document like this and not have you so much make revisions, but have you identify some of the problems with it. Say, okay, there are numerous problems with this particular document. Identify 3 problems. Point out, identify what the problems are, and suggest how those problems could be resolved. And here is a revision of that is much improved. It's shorter for one. It gets to the point. And there's another one here that you might benefit from reading through. And this concludes the notes for Chapter 6.